Okay, so we are here today. We tried a bit of Instagram Live, but me and Kat can't quite get the technical working. So we're going to go straight in and dive straight in. So just as a quick introduction to who Kat is. Kat is an occupational therapist, NLP practitioner, and accredited nutritionist based in New York, who's currently in Perth, Australia. That's another story. And she's worked around the world in the health and fitness industry as a coach, therapist, and trainer for 12 years. Kat works with improving athletes and members of the community's relationships with food, body image, and nutrition through her online business, Macro Muscles, and Mindset. And Kat, also, busy lady, is director of her raw food company, FitSnax, which is based in Sydney. So the idea of today is to connect me and Kat together, with me being a personal trainer here in Singapore, and just making sure we can provide you with the best knowledge and the best information that's out there currently, with some of the questions that we've had thrown in, and think that's very important to get everyone else involved and tuned up and clued up to their nutrition and their health long term.
Awesome. Excited for having me on.
No worries. No, I can't wait. It's going to be awesome. And I think it's just a lot of information that people just really need to know, right? And I know this isn't the first thing we're going to do. We've got a few ideas planned. So let's dive in.
Awesome.
So first question: movement, hydration, nutrition, and sleep. What makes up the hierarchy of weight loss and well-being? Where should the focus be?
Okay, this is a really interesting question. It's a very important one, and is one that for me personally has changed over time. I definitely think that we should always approach nutrition in terms of well-being and sustainability and longevity. So even if you're looking at, a weight loss phase or a fat loss phase, you still need to consider your well-being. So, that to me means no drastic 6-week shreds or really low calories or anything like that. Now, in saying that, when I look at this hierarchy, I actually put sleep at the base. I put it at the base for myself. I put it at the base for all my clients, whether they're a competitive athlete or whether they're just kind of, general gym goer or someone that just trains or walks lightly. Sleep is so essential to performance, to energy, to choices, to daily actions and habits. It's unreal. So for me, for example, if I have a really poor night's sleep, it can totally affect how I interact with someone the next day. It can affect how well I train. It can affect my recovery rate. It can affect how I act around food. There's so many studies right now that are linked between the hormone response of poor sleep and nutrition choices, because you really have less, less control over your prefrontal cortex of your brain, which is basically what drives you into action. You've got less control over it. So it's much easier to give in to the cravings that you've got from your hormone responses with poor sleep.
Yeah, no, I just adding on to that before we go to the next one, I agree as well. I think sleep for me is so important. Like, I'm normally, these days anyway, I'm in bed by 9 or 9:30 reading my book, and I have a whole routine that gets me calm before bed, getting off my screen at a certain point. And don't get me wrong, I have days where I don't always stick to that. I can notice the difference, right? And I think it's being more aware of those situations and what's the instigator and what all the triggers and how it kind of carries on. Like, the sleep is absolutely paramount. But when you've done sleep, what would be your next one from there?
So the name Macros, Muscles, Mindset actually falls under 5 of what I call my health factors. So I've got macros being nutrition, muscles being training and recovery, which encompasses sleep, and then mindset, which is relationship with yourself and relationship with others. Now, each client that I work with, I actually think the hierarchy might change, okay, except for that foundation of sleep. That's the same for everyone. It's at the bottom. But thereafter, it might change. So for me, for example, I'm someone that has been competitively training for quite some time. So for me, it is sleep, training, nutrition, relationships.
Yeah.
Whereas someone else might have just become a new mum. So the relationship thing comes above sleep. And I know sleep's really hard when you're a new mum. So it does vary for people, but they're the kind of 5 factors that we focus on in Macros Muscles Mindset.
Yeah, no, I agree too. And they're the same kind of premise that I will always train on too. So good that we align. I think that's why we're doing it. And the second questions, we've got a few to get through, is you get it quite a lot, I think, when you start talking to clients and or the general public, is I think it's twofold. Like, one is, how do you work out your macros? And 2, is it important for every single person to work out their macros? Like the average dose, they need to just know portion sizes versus macros. So I'll put it to the first one, how to work out your macros.
I'm actually going to flip it, because the first one should come after the second. So with macros and calories, what I think a lot of people get confused with or feel like you've got to choose just one or the other is the actual thing is you can't have one without the other. So essentially, when we look at the relationship between the two, if you've had a certain amount of calories in a day, it's made up from your macros. Okay. And then vice versa. If you've had a certain amount of macros, that's going to equate to a certain amount of calories. Now, I think if people are new to this concept, just so you get a little bit of an understanding, when we're talking about macronutrients, we're talking about the 3 energy sources that our body uses, which are protein, fats, and carbohydrates. Now, each of those macronutrients has a different requirement for energy. Okay. So the body uses, for example, fats for hormone function and brain function. And then you've got your protein, which is necessary for immune function and cell repair and muscle preservation. And then you've got your carbs, which are general energy for doing stuff.
Yeah.
Each of those macronutrients equates to a certain amount of calories. So for example, if we use grams, if you've got 1 gram of carbohydrates, that's 4 calories. If you've got 1 gram of fat, it's 9 calories. 1 gram of protein, 4 calories. So that's how and why when people talk about macros and calories, there is that relationship between the two. So when someone comes to me or probably even to you as well, and they're like, I've been told I need to eat 1,800 calories. Great. But if you eat 1,800 calories of pure fat, what is your body using to do immune function and cell repair and muscle preservation and brain function? So there's all the other things that you need to consider that energy is coming from and the body needs. Yeah. So for me, when someone asks, do I just count my calories? I actually say, okay, you need to learn about macros to learn about the portions that your body requires so it can expend the energy correctly. Yeah. So that's why, so when someone says that the macros are calories, it's kind of like, well, you need to know both. You need to know both. Yeah, you're going to get better results in terms of longevity and health markers if you're following your macronutrient targets.
Yeah. And would you say, so then going, when I added that other question on in terms of, obviously you've got the macro size, so it's understanding it, sure, but not, is it for someone to do it for lifelong or looking at more portion sizes? And everyone has different goals. It's me, obviously, when I'm coaching it. Yeah. Everyone's got a different goal. It depends on who the person is, environment, background, on so many things. But what would you say, like, to someone who's just starting out their journey? Is it macros? Is it learning about it and applying it, or is it just learning and then?
For anyone that comes to me, it's learning and applying. And the reason that I do that is because you can use it as a tool for the future to understand and know portion control correctly. And you can gain a sense of, wow, there is actually so much fat in that mayonnaise and I had no idea. Or understanding exactly what a full carbohydrate is. Honey is just a pure carbohydrate, and a lot of people don't know that. So it's really good to use it as a tool And even if it's just for a couple of weeks to gain that understanding and knowledge, get what you can from it and then be on your way.
Yeah.
So, it's definitely something, that I use with every client, no matter what.
Yeah. Okay. And just on the back of that, I think in terms of like just out there in the general public anyway, people just seem to be so obsessed with calorie counting, but not necessarily educated, like you said, in the right way in terms of understanding your macros in terms of your proteins, carbs and fats, like actually what they're used for, because most people, and I feel a lot of people shy away from carbs because there's this whole relationship with carbs that they're bad for you for some strange reason that marketing and companies have created. But I've actually just lost the whole general bit of what I was getting to then. You just went on a tangent. But just in terms of that with people and relationships with food in that way, so I found it again, is the negative side of like the calorie counting. So obviously it's understanding, I guess, different to people who have a different relationship with food. Is that a consideration? So if they've got a negative side in terms of that, how do you approach that?
That's quite a common thing, that I'll have people that come to me that have been on either a very low calorie intake and haven't understood macros, or I've had the opposite where it's been a very high fat diet and they have, avoided carbohydrates on purpose. So for me, a lot of the work that I do is trying to change behaviors and thoughts around food and body image. So macros plays a massive part in that, because there is, for most people, a kind of a stigma around food in some degree, or those that are working with me, I should say.
Yeah.
So it's breaking the barriers and the thought process around certain ideologies that you get from social media, from magazines, from website articles, eat 1,200 calories. It's like, I don't know who pulled that number out of a hat, but
and articles and that, you want proper books.
So for me, and this is part of my experience as a coach, I will work with someone one-on-one and work with them at where they're at when they come to me. So if it means that I have to go through 2-3 weeks of trying to break down some of those barriers, get them to understand why their body needs carbohydrates or how to actually control and portion fats a little bit better, I'll do that.
Yeah.
Whereas I've had experience with other coaches who are just like, pay me this money, I'm just going to shoot you out some macros. And that's where, I've done that with so many coaches and have just been like, I can't believe I'm paying you for this. So what I, have done in the past couple of years is try to bridge the gap and create a bigger kind of educational one-on-one component with clientele, which is why my client base is actually quite small, because it's a lot of work and I want to work with these people to help them and get them understanding what their body really needs and requires.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I love that approach. Okay, so the next one is countering calories versus clean and lean approach for weight loss. So this is like, which is better and why. So I'll explain to you what this lady means, because it's a program that we have here in Singapore. So obviously you've got the counting calories. Then you've got a program that I don't use. I wouldn't push, but it's a 4-week clean lean. So it pulls out carbs, it pulls out sugars, it pulls out everything within the first week apart from veggies and protein. Yes, I know, I'm not going to say anything because I wouldn't push it. But then on that basis, then every week something else is reintroduced. So nuts,
right,
fruits, and then carbs, and then XYZ. So you'll end up seeing on the end of the 4 weeks more of like a realistic start, but it's basically to pull people away from sugar and things like that.
Right.
So essentially a reset, but quite extreme.
Yeah. So for me, the whole thing is sustainability creates consistency. Yeah. If you've got consistency, it means adherence. If adherence is happening, you're going to get results.
Yeah.
Okay. So when someone comes to me and says something like, I'm trying to eat only clean, I'm like, what does clean mean? Have you washed it? Have you put it in a...
I literally just thought that then, yeah.
What I do with a lot of my clients, NLP is neuro-linguistic programming. So a lot of it is changing and transforming the way you think and talk. Okay. And for me, it's thinking and talking about food to change your behaviors around food and body image. So for example, good and bad, it doesn't exist.
No.
It's foods, less nutrient dense foods. We don't say clean and junk, doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So when I see or hear, a clean and lean, that to me just goes, something's being restricted.
Yeah.
And for us and a lot of my clients, whether or not they're a competitor or, I've got ultra runners, I've got national ice skating, team members and stuff like that. Sustainability creates consistency. So if I can make sure that they have a balanced diet day to day, and by balanced, I mean mainly wholesome foods, some less nutrient dense foods, they're going to be able to adhere to the program a lot better than trying to cut out something for 12 weeks and then blowing out as soon as it's done.
100%. I've seen I've seen a couple of success stories, but then you see everyone wants to come back onto that clean and lean program and say, oh, I felt good, this happened. But why go back to something, like you said, that's not sustainable? And I'm 100%, I preach that too. Same with the training as well. It needs to be sustainable. Otherwise, what's the point? Be consistent and sustainable throughout. Otherwise, there's just no point. You're going up and down, and then it's going to put your body into a whole different position, let alone your mind.
Yep. And that's exactly what creates, yo-yo dieting and those cycles of dieting, which is exactly what I want to pull people away and out of.
I could, 100% agree. I don't say anything.
Yep, good.
Okay, so the next question: what does a good diet look like? So this is an example the person gave: 3 meals, 2 snacks, or 6 smaller meals. So I'll leave that one to you on what you would say. So again,
sustainability creates consistency. So if you're someone, I never preach you need to have 6 meals a day. I would much prefer that you hit your macros over the day to how you feel comfortable. If you're someone that is looking specifically at muscle hypertrophy, then it is a little bit different. I'll explain that a little bit later because I know that was another question about protein. But the most, recent studies and stuff like that basically show that meal frequency doesn't actually matter that much. Distribution of protein in terms of like how much you're having at meal times makes a difference in terms of muscle protein synthesis. But in terms of like eating 6 meals a day is going to speed up your metabolism, stuff like that, debunked. As long as you're hitting macros at the end of the day, you're feeling comfortable, you don't feel stuffed or you don't feel starving, you're good to go.
Yeah. No, I agree too. I think it's always one thing it depends on the person, right? All of these questions are great, but it just depends on you as an individual and what has worked, but what needs to also change, right? So it's not always, obviously you're coming to a nutritionist or a trainer because something needs to change in your lifestyle, but it's also trying to find that balance of what works. So you work better eating smaller meals, but yet, like you said, you're going to be hitting those macros and everything. Thoughts on fasting, keto, fat, or fad? Do they have a place? I just
answered that 2 questions ago, but I will touch on fasting. Now, intermittent fasting can be done in various ways. Because of how I work with people, some of the clientele that I work with, unless you have a already good relationship with food or you haven't had any disordered habits around eating, like trying to not eat for a day to drop weight or, stuff like that, then intermittent fasting, I would say if it fits your lifestyle, do it. So, for people that do shift work or even myself on some nights, if I'm, starting work at 4 p.m. and finishing at 11 and I don't have time for dinner, my last meal might be at 3:30 p.m. So I'm intermittently fasting until the morning, but I've had my macros, at the beginning of the day. So there is a time and place for intermittent fasting, but it's something I definitely stray away from, especially in the initial, 3-4 months that I'm working with someone, because I'm trying to create something that is sustainable on a daily basis where you're not having to think about any kind of restriction. And it can be that, thought process of like, oh my God, I can't eat after 4.
Yeah, very true. And you watch people and how they respond like that, and you're like, okay, it shouldn't be a forced thing. It should be natural. Like sometimes, like on a Sunday morning, I won't eat until maybe 12 or 1, but that just happens. I get on with things, not even thinking about it, and then I'll eat the rest of my macros like throughout the day. So I think it flows.
Yeah, and then with the keto, unless you're epileptic, which is what a keto diet was actually designed for, I've never had anyone use keto diet. I'm just not, no. Wouldn't do it myself or any of my clients. And other fads, that's it. It's a fad.
Yeah. Not sustainable and it's not consistent. I think that's one of the key messages that we are driving on each of these questions so far. Okay, so next question, body types. So we got your ectomorph, mesomorph, and endomorph. Is this a thing that we should use to dictate our approach? So does that affect what macros and everything?
Quite an interesting question. Now, in the past, so when I started out, that was actually how I determined people's basal metabolic rate. So basically the amount of calories that you need at rest. Yeah. So just so people know, if you're at rest, you still need, like if you did a day doing nothing, your body still needs a certain amount of calories to, you know, grow hair, blink, digest food, go to the bathroom. So I did actually use specific equations around those to collect, you know, that basal metabolic rate info. Now, over the years, as more studies have come out, we kind of keep up to date with the, you know, sciences that are out there. I no longer use those equations or those methods. I've moved across to something else, which I have found has been much more, well, it's easier to do. And there's been no issue with it in terms of, you know, finding out people's calorie ranges and stuff like that. I think that is slowly more and more becoming pushed to the wayside, just because the studies that are coming out, you know, more and more, it's less sort of focused on and needed as such.
Yeah, and I guess looking again, like what we said at the beginning, it's not just the body type, it's your environment, what you're surrounding yourself with, what information and consuming, like nutrition, sleep, training, movement, like all of those things, they come into more of a factor, and then your goals of where you want to be, right? So it all
exactly. And then, you know, for me, so I've got that, it's probably about 60% that do an intense sport or compete in something. So even for them, where, you know, in the past I would have used those 3 body types, now I focus more on, okay, what kind of sport are they actually doing and how fast or how much are they going to burn through? So someone that does CrossFit, for example, which is like 45 minutes of like death real quick, is going to need quite a high carbohydrate intake, okay, because you're going to be burning through so much, like, you know, quick energy. But then I've got someone like an ultra runner who's running for 14 hours, and it's like, okay, well, this is a slower energy burn. I need something that's going to be like dense to last that long. So they're going to be on a different ratio of protein, fats, and carbs than a CrossFitter. They're going to have a higher fat content, and that's just how it is, because they're going to need more calories to get that 14-hour distance.
Yeah, good. No, I like how you separated that, and I think that makes it a lot clearer for everyone. Okay, so that goes on to our next question that we said. How do I know how much protein versus carbs I need to eat each meal a day?
Okay, so this kind of goes back to what we were saying before. So the studies that came out in 2018 basically said that while meal frequency doesn't matter, distribution of protein for muscle protein synthesis does. So basically, you've got a minimum threshold of muscle protein synthesis. Okay, so if you've had about 20 grams, you're going to stimulate that protein synthesis. But there's a max out, depending on your lean muscle mass, which is between about 30 and 50 grams. Okay, so if you're someone that, say, has 150 grams of carbohydrates that they need to eat during the day, but you have it all in one shot, doesn't mean that the 150 is going to be wasted. What it means is that 50 grams of that will be used for protein synthesis, and then the other 100 grams will be used for, immune function, etc., the other things protein's needed for. But if you were to distribute it a little bit more evenly throughout the day, so if you had 4 or 5 meals and were having, say, 30 grams of each, you're going to stimulate protein synthesis each time.
Yeah.
So people that do that in terms of distributing protein evenly throughout the day or at those ranges have a higher recovery rate and have an increase in hypertrophy. So they basically build lean muscle mass faster.
Yeah.
So it does depend on your goals. It also depends on, how you're choosing to eat as well. Because if you're someone that intermittent fasts, then you might come into that problem. But if you don't care about muscle mass so much, then meh. In terms of how much protein you actually need, the easiest way to do it is basically 1 pound body weight is 1 gram of protein for the day. So if I weigh 140 pounds, it's about 140 grams of protein that I would consume during the day, maybe just a little bit under, between 0.8 and 1.
And what is in relation to if people weigh themselves as in kgs?
So in kgs, just times your weight by 2.2, and then that'll give you your pounds.
And just on that, just from men versus women, so I train a lot of more women. That's predominantly who I am more involved with. Definitely when I've been doing all my research and my studying, it comes up in the topic of, for us, we need to have more protein, onset protein a lot quicker after a workout, for example, than our male counterparts. Is that something that you work with, or what do you?
So again, that comes actually back to that study that was done in 2018. They didn't say that they call it an anabolic window, doesn't exist. But what they have said is that the amount of protein that is consumed within, say, 60 to 120 minutes should be between that 25 and 50 grams worth of carbs.
Yeah.
Protein, sorry.
I was going to say.
25 to 50 grams of protein. Now, if you're a male, it's going to be on the higher side because you're probably going to have a higher lean muscle mass than, a female counterpart.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I just wanted to touch on that because I know it's a big theme, especially for women at the moment with that, and definitely getting enough protein in. So the next question, artificial sweetness, total no-no or okay in small amounts even?
A couple of things about the artificial sweeteners. Firstly, they don't activate the same neural response that sugar does. Okay, so if someone is on a low-calorie diet, they've been in a deficit for a while, having some artificial sweeteners to kind of curb cravings, totally fine. There's been no meta-analysis to link aspartame to cancer. I personally think a little bit of artificial sweetener a day is fine. What I have more concern about is sugar alcohols.
Yeah.
So that are low carb are generally pumped with sugar alcohols, and they're things like xylitol, sorbitol, maltitol, and they can cause quite a lot of digestive disruption. A lot of people will bloat after those, or go the opposite way and then have running to the bathroom. So my concern about that is it's probably less likely that you're going to consume, a whole bottle of Diet Coke every day, opposed to having 2 or 3 Quest bars that are full of alcohol sugars. So again, it comes down to balance and, being smart about your choices. But in terms of artificial sweeteners, if you're having a little bit here and there once a day, have a Diet Coke here and there, add in some equal to your coffee. The studies so far haven't really linked anything. So I debunk that one too.
Okay. Currently debunk it until anything else further supports anything,
yeah.
Right? Okay. And then...
well, that meta-analysis, so people know, was this year.
Okay. You'll have to send
yeah.
that stuff. Yeah. Okay, so this is one that I'm completely linked with and have a sweet tooth as well. How to address sweet tooth cravings?
That's an interesting question because you can kind of think about it in lots of ways. So in terms of sweet tooth cravings, I find that if you're using something like MyFitnessPal or using the theory of mainly wholesome foods for the day and then a couple of less nutrient dense foods for the day, you're able to curb it. I don't feel like you should restrict anything if you are having, you know, a sweet craving. The issue would be more around whether or not that was becoming something where you were acting on it frequently or in excess. So if you were almost to the point where overeating or consciously overeating, or on the other spectrum, binge eating. So yeah, that's quite a hard question to kind of dip into.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I mean,
sorry.
My major thing with that is if it's just someone kind of being like, I have a sweet tooth, just plan in to have a little bit of chocolate every day. I have a Kit Kat chunky every day because this means I don't have any cravings. You know, I used to, you know, 10 years ago, I would restrict to the point where, you know, on the weekend I would then blow out and I would just go crazy on sugars because I had restricted myself from it.
Yeah, I think just on mine, because it's quite on topic with me, like for the last few months, I started getting in excess, like getting a little bit out of hand with the chocolate. Like, not just having, I'd go walking to 7-Eleven, I'd pick one bar up, I'd go, now I'll have another one. And it was just getting to the point of like, what are you doing? And then I'll have a big bar of chocolate on the weekend. So this is me as a trainer. We all go through it. I do have a sweet tooth, but for me, what helped me, and again, I guess it's all individual and it depends on your scenario and who you are as a person. And I have a healthy relationship with food, but that just got a bit too much. So for me, I just had an October reset. I just said, I don't need chocolate. And I've had some cake, but it shows it's the chocolate that's my trigger, right? So
yeah,
not an unhealthy thing. I've just taken it out just for a month, just to reset. So I stopped having it that much all the time. So I was just walking in going, yeah.
Yeah.
So that
I mean, that's
balance is now, I know enough to what I need to do.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a lot of, you know, for people that are interested in knowing kind of more about what I do, a lot of what I do is work with people that have had issues or feel constant or consistent urges and cravings for food. So what I do is work one-on-one and try and break those habits or work out where they've actually stemmed from, and then develop and implement trial and error as many things as we need until we can reduce that.
Yeah, awesome. No, I love that. Okay, next one. I'm hungry at night. I can't sleep when my stomach is growling. What is a healthy snack? Protein shake? That's the question.
Firstly, how much have you eat through the day?
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting question. I would be delving into the day rather than the actual night. I would be looking at, okay, how much voluminous food did I have? Did I have lots of vegetables today? Was my protein high today? Those kind of things really fill you up, which can help to reduce those urges and feels of, you know, being hungry later in the evening. If it's something where you've like have eaten well, maybe you've trained really hard, or, you know, you actually just are hungry, I would consider something that isn't super high in sugars before bed. I would look at something that is serotonin producing. So serotonin is a neurotransmitter that is produced in the gut and can help to improve sleep. So rather than trying to like stimulate adrenaline and get you all like pumped up with having lots of sugars and things like that, I would look at something like Greek yogurt with a little bit of walnut, maybe some flax seeds, and just try and keep it, you know, easily digestible. Even a bowl of oats, maybe with a little bit of protein, some chia seeds, flax seeds, and kind of go down that route rather than being like, I'm hungry, I'm just going to go for gold or just have a protein shake before bed.
Yeah, so you'd say no on the protein shake.
I mean, it's a bit boring.
Well, yeah, exactly. I guess it's a chance to get real food in as well, right? So
yeah, I mean, if you're hungry, I always think if you're really hungry, it's better to eat your calories rather than drink them.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one is gut health. How can this be improved? So fiber intake or taking a drink such as Activia or something similar. Is this important in weight loss?
gut health, sleep. Did you know that is also related? So gut health is quite a big topic. It's a bit of a buzzword. The last 10 years, there's been a lot of studies about microbiome, so the organisms or the environment that the organisms live in within your gut. Up to 500, 600 different species of microbiome organisms within the system, which is just crazy. In terms of improving it, the things that I would consider is firstly sleep. The second thing is hydration, making sure that you're well hydrated, okay, because your hydration levels helps everything that's going on the inside. It basically means that you're going to be able to stimulate peristalsis properly, which is the process of the large intestine moving or churning out your waste. It also means that in your small intestine, the villi that help absorb food, so these little things that do this, if you keep hydrated, it means that those things are moving properly, so you're absorbing food and nutrients into the bloodstream better. So hydration, so sleep, hydration, nutrient choices, so making sure that you've got about 80% of your day coming from wholesome, nutrient-dense food, so dark leafy greens, plenty of vegetables. And the fourth one is if you're someone that is experiencing doing those things, you're eating quite well, I'll probably consider looking a little bit further into the gut and just checking that you're not on a FODMAP scenario. So a lot of people, when we talk about FODMAPs, basically a higher FODMAP diet can mean that your gut reacts a little bit differently to how it normally would for others. So I'll probably consider just looking at that and seeing if you need to reduce any high FODMAP foods like garlic or onion that can actually kind of aggravate the gut a little bit. So they're probably the first four, and generally when you improve each of those first three, things tend to improve.
So just repeat that. So sleep, hydration,
nutrient-dense foods at about 80% daily, and then if need be, start looking into FODMAPs.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that's cool. Next one is...
Don't forget about stress, guys.
Stress.
Reduce that.
Actually, a huge topic.
That's a different podcast.
Yeah, that's a completely different level. The next one is supplements. So is there an age you should take some? And if so, what? Because obviously it depends, we're all different. We all need different things in our diet. So supplements, how would you tackle that?
So supplements is one that if we look at nutrition on a hierarchy, supplements is at the very top. Okay, it matters least. Where a lot of people, because of what's kind of thrown out there to us, have this detox tea, have this protein powder that's got this, and this. Supplements comes up as a major contributing factor to what people think, will help them reach their goals. Whereas it's literally there to supplement your diet, okay, and how you eat on a daily basis. Now, a lot of them have been studied well, some not so much. When I look at people on a kind of general basis, the couple that I recommend if needed tend to be a greens powder.
Yep.
Okay, when we're talking about a greens powder, we're looking at something like spirulina, chlorella, any of those kind of dark green algae, because what they do is help to hydrate the gut. Okay, they help to improve digestion, which basically same thing. It's all about helping those little villi do their thing. So greens powders, supplements, protein powder. I do recommend that for most people just to help get their protein levels up, especially if you're finding it quite hard to kind of get that additional, 30 grams in per day. It's easy to use. You can have in a shake, a smoothie. You can make protein pancakes. You can kind of mix it into anything, yogurt, make it in protein pudding. So protein powder. For people that do relatively intense sports or are suffering from things like joint pain, arthritis, I recommend cod liver oil just to help reduce inflammation. Same with turmeric, or depending where you are. Not something I recommend eating every day, but if you've had a session where you're like, I'm stuffed, and you feel like the next day you might be relatively inflamed, or, you know, your recovery is a bit poor, that's another one I'd consider. They're kind of the top ones.
Okay.
We're looking at a population a little bit older, or people who are training quite frequently. Magnesium calcium mix is also a really good one to consider, and you can't really go wrong with that, even just for general health. Magnesium is zapped quite quickly from the body, so being able to kind of have a tablet before bed helps repair, recover, can actually help you sleep a little bit. That's probably one I would consider just for like your general health and well-being.
Yeah, I think it's definitely important as well when people are picking supplements off the shelf, right, in terms of the quality of the actual product, because there's a lot of brands and companies out there. One that Blackmore, that's notoriously not going to be the best in terms of quality. So I think it's just definitely for anyone who's listening to the supplement side of things, it's just worth talking to a nutritionist, right? Like, in terms of just get the advice of what the brands that you can afford to use with those supplements, because I think if you're going to go cheap, you're not going to get necessarily the same results. So it's worth investing in your time if you're going to take that time to do it. But I also agree with the supplement side of thing. It's first look at your nutrients. It's got to be that food hygiene. You've got to have the wholesome food, the dark leafy greens and your veggies before even like supplements. I think it's just that we're in that society now where it's easy to get that quick fix. The supplement's just going to help it. So cool. That's it. That's whereas you just need to get that food healthy and wholesome.
Yeah.
Help the gut and all your digestion and everything going forwards. Otherwise, it's just...
Yeah. And the other thing to kind of note with supplements, if you do choose to go down that path, you're probably going to get, actually not probably, you are going to get better results out of them if it's in a powdered form. So using like a turmeric powder, using a greens powder, using magnesium calcium powder, you're going to get better results for that because it can absorb into the bloodstream a lot faster than doing capsulated form. The other thing is the capsulated form is usually where the price variation happens between a product. The cheaper the product is, generally the harder and thicker the capsule is, which means that the nutrients within are going to take longer to absorb and digest into the system and are going to be a lot less efficient. So that is usually why there's a variation in price. Like you can see some like, you know, calcium tablets for $60 and then some for 10. Guarantee that that one that is 10 is probably a vegetable cellulose and it's just one ingredient. So you'd have it and it dissolves like that. Whereas the other ones are hard plastic that you'll find on something like a Blackmore's or a Nature's Way. They're thick, man. You can like tap on it for days and then that takes time to digest. So that is actually a good point. That is the variation and why there's this very big discrepancy with price ranges.
Like it. Good. I like that one. Just gonna see what the other questions are. I think we're pretty much through. I
did want to touch on one thing because I didn't answer how do you calculate macros.
Yes.
So I just want to note for people it is quite a big topic because there's two things that you need to understand. One being your basal metabolic rate, so the amount of calories you need at rest, and then your total daily energy expenditure. So basically your maintenance calories. So if you do want to know how to do that, I've actually got on my Instagram page two things that you can use to work it out. So there's an IGTV episode number 2 that is literally me telling you how to do it. And then there's a post just before that about the guide to fat loss. Again, it's there in written form. You can work those things out.
Awesome. So we'll try and find the links and what have you, just so everyone can go or put your profile down so everyone can just check it out. I think there's just time for one more. Sugar versus natural sugar through your fruits. So obviously there's a level with the fructose through like your fruits and your sugar, and then you've got your refined, all of the actual unhealthy, the processed sugar bits. And obviously we can notify like the difference in it. Is it bad having a lot of fruit in your diet? So if you are a sweet tooth or you like your fruits, is it too much in having sugar, and does it depend on the type of body and like goals? So if you're more of a larger person, does that affect it having too much sugar in that diet, for example?
So this is a topic that comes up a lot, and it can be quite different for the person. So someone, for example, that's like, you know, athlete has a much higher carbohydrate intake and they need a lot more high glycemic index type of carbohydrates, which is basically carbs that get straight into the system, you know, so after your workout, you can repair and recover quite quickly. Say we're talking about general pop. So a lot of people probably listening, don't ban out food like fruit. Yeah. Think about it. If you think it's got sugar in it, but you're hungry, you know that eating the apple is going to be a more wholesome choice than eating the
donut.
Twinkies. Donut. So there's no reason to cut out, you know, fruit. If you want to get your carb sources from fruit, you know, 2 serves a day, that's kind of the recommended intake, 2 to 3 serves. Sweet. In terms of refined sugars, that's where you've got to think about that balance of wholesome and, you know, less nutrient dense. You know, once a day, like I said, I'll have something that is refined, like a Kit Kat, like a, you know, piece of cake, whatever. That helps me mentally and means that I don't go, you know, off the rails on the weekend. So you've got to think about it, again, as balance. Sustainability creates consistency. So don't stress out about the small things like, oh my God, there's a heap of sugar in my grapes. Eating the grapes is going to be better than eating the donut 3 times over in the same day.
Yeah, awesome. I think that wraps us up. I think the last 2 questions we've covered anyway.
Yeah.
But that was awesome. I definitely learned just a couple of things that you put out there, and I loved all your hand signals getting everywhere. I remember all your dances.
Aristasis villi.
But no, that was awesome. And I think that's just a really good break-in for the relationship that me and you want to take on terms of a business level, and how we can work to provide our clients and a wider audience. So I think just from us, like, thank you so much for everyone who has tuned in and stayed this far with us. If you have, you've obviously found it quite useful. Make sure you drop in the comments where we share it on YouTube and our Instagram channels what you liked and any further questions, because we will do this again if there is demand. And we've got a few other exciting things that we're going to start talking about too. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no worries. And we will post this and see how we go.
Perfect. All right. See you soon.